Welcome to Totally Awesome Film Spoilers, and in this video we're going to talk about the 2024 film Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. We finally have a sequel to the 1988 Tim Burton classic Beetlejuice that is 36 years in the making. The first 1988 Beetlejuice movie ended up being a surprise hit and made on a budget of $15 million, grossed $85 million, and the film received much positive accolades. The characters were popular and an entire franchise was spawned. There was an animated series called Beetlejuice that ran for 4 seasons from 1989 to 1991, and this spawned a line of toys and even a video game. Then in 1992, Universal Studios opened their musical, Beetlejuice's Rock and Roll Graveyard, which ran for 24 years, finally closing in 2016. And there was even a popular Broadway musical based on Beetlejuice that opened in 2018. In 1990, Tim Burton was working on a sequel titled Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, where the Dietz family would move to Hawaii to open a resort, but discover that they're building a resort on a burial ground of an ancient Hawaiian kahuna. Beetlejuice would return to help the Dietz family and even compete in a surfing contest. Both Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder agreed to be in the sequel. Then both Tim Burton and Michael Keaton had to drop out in order to do Batman Returns, and the project slowly went into development hell. Later, other sequels considered were Beetlejuice and the Haunted Mansion and Beetlejuice Goes West, but those ideas were also scrapped. In 2011, Warner Brothers met with Tim Burton and Michael Keaton to discuss a Beetlejuice sequel, and Winona Ryder expressed interest in returning. It officially entered development in 2013, but the story kept needing rewrites, and by 2019, the project was officially canceled. However, in 2022, Brad Pitt's studio Plan B announced that they would be making a Beetlejuice sequel in conjunction with Warner Brothers. This would become Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. And in March 2023, Jenna Ortega, who had already worked with Tim Burton on Wednesday, announced she was attached to the sequel. And so Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is finally out in the theaters. And these legacy sequels are always a mixed bag, ranging from terrible like Matrix Resurrection, Terminator Dark Fate, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, but also can be fantastic like Top Gun Maverick, Mad Max Fury Road, and Alien Romulus, and even the TV series Cobra Kai. And you just never know what you're gonna get. So I was very nervous about this Beetlejuice sequel. Well, I am happy and relieved that Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, while not perfect, is closer to fantastic than the other way around. And this movie was fun, it was funny, charming, and I had an absolute blast watching it. Michael Keaton returns as Beetlejuice, and he hasn't missed a step. And we get the return of Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara, and it really does feel like we're picking up exactly 36 years after we last saw them. And Jenna Ortega makes a pitch-perfect new addition to this franchise. And it was the perfect sequel to the 1988 Beetlejuice movie that continues the story while expanding on the lore, but it's also a fun little story that stands on its own. And in this video, I'm going to break down Beetlejuice Beetlejuice and discuss some Easter eggs and references that you might have missed. But first, spoiler alert. You've been warned. The movie starts with a panning shot of the town of Winter River, which then suddenly transforms into the small model of the town that the Maitlands built in the attic. And we even get a small miniature of Adam and Barbara Maitland, the ghosts from the first Beetlejuice movie. Now, unfortunately, Adam and Barbara Maitland, played by Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, will not be in the sequel. Alec Baldwin has had his own share of legal troubles after the accidental discharge of the loaded gun that shot and killed the producer on his movie. But Gina Davis is doing well. However, Gina Davis has joked that she and Alec Baldwin could not be in this movie because ghosts don't age, while the two of them certainly have, making it impossible to play immortal, ageless ghosts after themselves having aged 36 years. In the reality of this movie, we can assume that Adam and Barbara have moved on to a happier plane of existence. We then meet Lydia Dietz, played by the incomparable Winona Ryder, who still has the exact same hairstyle she had in the first Beetlejuice movie. And we learn that she has parlayed her connection to the afterlife and ghosts into a successful career as the host of her own talk show called Ghost House. And the set resembles the attic of the house in Beetlejuice. However, during a taping of one of the episodes of her show, she looks out in the audience and sees a random man who happens to be wearing a white and black striped shirt, and she has a flashback of Beetlejuice. And apparently her meeting with him 36 years ago still haunts her. Or maybe Beetlejuice really is trying to reach out to her. She freaks out, and then her boyfriend and producer of the show, Rory, comes to her rescue, and he is such a douchebag schmuck. we already can't wait for him to get his comeuppance. And we see that he and Lydia are in a toxic, codependent relationship. And Rory is played hilariously and devilishly by Justin Theroux, who nails it with his portrayal of Rory. Suddenly, Lydia gets an unexpected call from her stepmother, Delia Dietz. And we get the return of Catherine O'Hara, playing Lydia's stepmother, Delia Dietz, who is now an artist in New York. And she and her stepdaughter Lydia have now learned to get along, and they actually like each other after 36 years. And we find out that Lydia's father, Charles Dietz, has just died. He was going bird watching when his plane crashed in the ocean, and he was eaten by a shark. And of course, we do not get the return of Jeffrey Jones, but we do get the return of Charles as a stop-motion puppet. And then the half-eaten body of Charles Dietz, with only legs and a missing upper torso, appears in the afterlife. The actor Jeffrey Jones has his own share of legal problems. He was arrested in 2002 for possession of sexually explicit photos of a 14-year-old boy and received 5 years probation and had to register as a sexual offender. He was arrested again in 2004 for not updating his sex offender status, and then again in 2010 for the same offense, and did receive an additional 3 years probation. We then get Danny DeVito, who is a ghost janitor in the afterlife, and he's buffing the floor, but then runs into a water puddle which electrocutes the floor and reanimates the ghost of Dolores, who is Beetlejuice's ex-wife, played by international film legend Monica Bellucci. And I love Monica Bellucci, and I thought it was odd to get an actress of her status to be in Beetlejuice Beetlejuice until I realized that Monica Bellucci and director Tim Burton are dating. Her body has been separated into multiple pieces, and she collects them and she staples herself back together, and then she sucks the soul out of Danny DeVito's ghost. Dolores is missing one of her fingers, which is the last thing that she staples, and this is a reference to the first Beetlejuice movie where Beetlejuice keeps this finger in his pocket. We then get a flashback of Beetlejuice's origin story. Beetlejuice was a grave robber during the Black Plague, and he met and fell in love with Dolores, who was the leader of a soul-sucking death cult who stayed young and immortal by sucking people's souls. She married Beetlejuice, and on their wedding night poisoned him in order to suck his soul, but while dying, Beetlejuice managed to cut her up with an axe. They both died, and she did not get a soul, which is why she has returned to get Beetlejuice's soul this time around. We then meet Lydia's daughter Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega, and this is such perfect casting. And I predicted that they were going to do something similar to her character in Wednesday, but I was so impressed that she's a completely different character here. She's a normal girl who doesn't believe in ghosts, and she believes that her mother is a fraud. Astrid does not get along with her mother, and this is a callback to the first film when Lydia herself did not get along with her parents. So like mother, like daughter. And we learn that she was much closer to her father. However, Lydia divorced Astrid's father 2 years before he went missing while saving the rainforests of Brazil. And Astrid feels that her mother's inability to contact the ghost of her father is some sort of passive-aggressive negligence toward her. Delia and Lydia go pick up Astrid at her boarding school, and at the school we see a large hand statue in front of the school, and this is the statue from the first Beetlejuice movie, and apparently they've donated it to this school. And these days, Beetlejuice is still running his bioexorcism business, but now he runs it as a call center, which is staffed by a bunch of men with shrunken heads. And his loyal number 2 is Bob, who even goes as far as being Beetlejuice's decoy when Dolores comes hunting for him. And poor Bob is going to unfortunately get his soul sucked by Dolores toward the end of the movie. Now, Beetlejuice is still obsessed with Lydia and still wants to marry her. We then meet police detective Wolf Jackson, played by Willem Dafoe, and he's great. This is such a weird, random character that just makes this film so much fun. And Wolf Jackson was an actor in 80s action films when he was live, sort of like a cross between Clint Eastwood and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And now in the afterlife, he's become an actual police detective. And at the funeral of Charles Dietz, we get the clergyman who is Father Damien. What a name for a pastor. And he's played by Bum Gorman, who always plays these oddball, creepy roles, and Father Damien is no exception. And at the funeral, we meet Jane Butterfield, who is the real estate broker and the daughter of Jane Butterfield from the first Beetlejuice movie. In that film, Jane Butterfield had a daughter named Little Jane who sat in the backseat of the car, and this Jane Butterfield is that Little Jane now all grown up and has become a real estate agent herself. And then we get this very awkward marriage proposal by Rory to Lydia. Rory decides to use Lydia's father's funeral as the moment to pressure Lydia into marrying him so that they can have a Halloween wedding. What a schmuck. And she just thinks the timing is not right, but she hesitantly says yes. And Astrid is just so disgusted by the display, she has to get out of the house. She takes the bike and decides to go for a ride around town. And we do get some nice Easter egg references to the first movie. The bike ride evokes Lydia's bike ride in Beetlejuice on the same bike. We also get the red-covered bridge that Adam and Barbara drove off of. And we pass by Lydia's boarding school, Miss Shannon's School for Girls. Now, due to a series of unfortunate circumstances, Astrid almost crashes into a car and then crashes through a fence and hits a tree where she meets Jeremy. And I thought Jeremy and Astrid had a really nice chemistry. And I thought Jeremy was such a charming man. And I have to admit, the reveal that he's a ghost completely surprised me. I did not see it coming. Although I did remember thinking that it was weird that they intentionally did not show the parents' faces as he and Astrid passed by in the house. In retrospect, there were other clues that I missed. The book of the recently deceased, the fact that all his room decorations are from the 90s, and the fact that he's obsessed with Crime and Punishment. Now, I want to remind you to please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. This is totally a new channel. It's only 3 weeks old, and I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. It costs you nothing, but you can't imagine how much it helps me out. So come on, just hit the subscribe button. I'll wait. So Astrid goes to the attic, and it looks exactly like it did 36 years ago, and Astrid finds an advertisement for Beetlejuice's bioexorcist business. Lydia freaks out because she does not want Beetlejuice to come back in her life, and Lydia tells Rory about Beetlejuice, and he tries to prove her wrong, that it's all in her head, by saying Beetlejuice's name 3 times. And then they are teleported inside the model of the town, and then they go to do couples therapy with Beetlejuice. And he uses magic to sew Lydia's lips so that she can't speak, a callback to when he did a similar thing to Barbara Maitland. And Beetlejuice literally spills his guts. He introduces Lydia and Rory to his inner child, a baby Beetlejuice. And then he freaks Rory out with his winged face, the same face he showed the Maitlands in the first movie. And Lydia says, "Home, home, home," which sends them back, and Rory wakes up thinking that it may all have been a bad dream. Astrid has a date with Jeremy, and she dresses up as Marie Curie, the scientist who discovered radium, but then died of radiation poisoning from her own research, and she's dressed up as a dying Marie Curie. And it's pretty morbid, but it's funny and clever. But I feel her Marie Curie costume is a subtle homage to her Wednesday character, also produced, created, and directed by Tim Burton. And then when the two kiss, they begin to float, and we discover that Jeremy is really a ghost. He tricks her into trading places with him in the afterlife, and Astrid realizes that her mother is not a fraud, but really was communicating with ghosts the whole time. And Jeremy asks Astrid to help him become human again by going to the afterlife with him, where he's going to introduce her to his father, although he neglects to tell her that he's actually sacrificing her life in exchange for living again. Back at the house, Lydia learns from Jane Butterfield that Jeremy actually died decades ago after murdering his parents, and then while being chased by the police, fell out of a tree and died. Lydia rushes back to their house, but she is too late to stop Astrid from going into the afterlife, so she has no choice but to call Beetlejuice for help. Beetlejuice offers to help on one condition, and that is that she must marry him. He's still trying to marry Lydia after all these years. Delia is doing a ceremony, and she has purchased 2 asps for the ceremony honoring her husband, and has ordered that the 2 snakes have their fangs removed. But of course the fangs were not removed. The snakes bite her and she dies. And she ends up in the waiting room of the dead, but doesn't really seem to realize that she's died. And she also calls Beetlejuice for help. Jeremy trades Astrid's life in order to get his life back, and Astrid is taken to the Soul Train, a train that takes recently deceased souls to places like the Great Beyond, the Pearly Gates, the Elysium Fields, or the Fires of Damnation. And the Soul Train was a long-running R&B music and dance show that ran for 36 years, from 1970 to 2006. And I was wondering, is it a coincidence that it ran 36 years and this movie takes place 36 years after after the first one. Not sure, it could just be a random coincidence, but there you go. And that show was hosted by Don Cornelius, who is homaged by the ghost conducting the train. And the Soul Train TV show ran every Saturday at noon, and if you were the child of the 70s, and when Soul Train came on the air, it meant that Saturday morning cartoons were over. Lydia and Astrid end up on Saturn's moon, where they encounter the sandworm. And the sandworm looks exactly like it did in the first Beetlejuice movie. Tim Burton avoided using CGI for this effect and used the same stop-motion technology that he used in the first movie in order to have the scene look exactly like it did in 1988. It's a great effect. Lydia and Astrid run into her long-deceased father, Richard, and they have a nice reunion. Jeremy needs a bureaucratic stamp on his passport in order to live again, but finds out that his agent is Beetlejuice, who sends him to the fires of damnation. Beetlejuice rescues Astrid, and Lydia and Astrid make their way to the living world just in time to make Lydia and Rory's Halloween wedding. And Beetlejuice gives Rory a truth serum that makes him admit that he's using Lydia for money and prestige, and Lydia is furious and knocks him out with a magic Beetlejuice boxing glove. Then Beetlejuice has all the influencers get sucked onto their phones, and it's a nice metaphor for the younger generation always living by looking at their phones. Beetlejuice is finally ready to marry Lydia, and Lydia gets the same red dress from 1988. And then we get this crazy music scene. Remember when Beetlejuice got everyone to lip sync Deo? Well, in this film, they lip sync MacArthur Park by Richard Harris. And it is just such a random and bizarre moment, and you just can't help but laugh. And the longer the musical number goes on, it just gets funnier and funnier because it is just so random. And he makes Jenna Ortega and Winona Ryder dance, and it is just so fantastic. Then Wolf Jackson runs in with his men and tries to arrest Beetlejuice, but the magic is just too powerful, and he freezes them and incorporates them into the musical number. But Dolores crashes the party and tries to take Beetlejuice's soul, but Astrid is able to call a sandworm, and Beetlejuice is able to divert the sandworm like a matador, but the sandworm devours Dolores and Rory. Thanks to a loophole that Beetlejuice snuck Lydia into the afterlife, we learn that the contract of marriage is null and void. Lydia is free from her obligation to marry Beetlejuice. Delia tells Lydia and Astrid that she actually did die, and she joins her husband Charles on the Soul Train. Lydia and Astrid make up and bond as mother and daughter, and they travel the world together as they become closer. And the movie ends with Astrid meeting a European man, and they get married and they have children, but it turns out to be Lydia's dream sequence where Astrid gives birth to the Beetlejuice baby. She wakes up and she is alone, but it appears that she continues to be haunted by her experience with Beetlejuice. This movie received positive reviews, earning a Rotten Tomatoes score of 77% of critics liking the film. And yet they were unsure how they would do in terms of box office, and the initial projections were about $50 to $60 million. However, buzz continued to increase, and Thursday previews were very strong, making $13 million in previews, and so the projected box office was raised to $80 to $100 million. However, when the weekend was over and the box office receipts were counted, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice blew away expectations and made $111 million in its first weekend. The opening weekend surpassed the entire run of the first Beetlejuice movie, and so far it has made $172 million worldwide in its second weekend, but it's still going strong. So no doubt a third film will be in the works. And Beetlejuice was just such a fun, charming movie, and I am looking forward to seeing it again this weekend. I absolutely love this movie, and I can't wait for the sequel, which we all know what it's going to be called. It has to be called Beetlejuice Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, right? That ends my episode on Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I hope you had a great time, and if you want to check out my video that breaks down Alien Romulus, just hit the link over here.